So, welcome to the D3Con podcast again. This is our second episode in English because we have an international guest here. I'm very happy to see him. You can also see him, and other people that are only listening to us, they can't see him, only listen to him. But I'm very happy to have you here. It's Rajeev Goel from PubMatic. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Thomas. Great to be here with you.
Your name doesn't sound like it, but you are American?
I am, yes. Born and raised in the U.S.
Nice. But you have probably some parents that come from...
Exactly, from India. So my parents came to the U.S. about 50 years ago and stayed in the U.S., of course, in Silicon Valley. And so that's where I was born and raised.
Yeah, nice. You also sound like that.
That sounds about right.
And he's the CEO and founder of PubMatic. And so we're going to talk about publisher topics again today. Very happy to have you here. I'm looking forward to the story of PubMatic and story of yourself. So maybe you can start with some introduction. How did Rajeev get to found a company like PubMatic, and how did it develop over the last couple of years? And what's your story, personally?
Yeah, great, and wonderful to be here, back here in Germany. PubMatic has been in Germany for 7, almost 8 years now. So I've been here dozens of times, and always nice to be here on a sunny day as well. So. To the background. So like I said, I was born and raised in Silicon Valley. Both of my parents worked in high tech as entrepreneurs and at large companies. They're both retired now. And so my, childhood dinner conversations were around tech, around, new businesses, around expanding businesses, changing industries. And so I have a brother as well who's also a founder at PubMatic. And, it's
a family business.
It's a family business in that sense. So we really grew up with that kind of, I think, a mindset and DNA. And we started a company when we were both in college called chipshot.com, custom built golf equipment delivered direct over the internet. And this was back in the...
Custom built what equipment?
Golf equipment.
Ah, nice.
So this was back in the late 90s when, if you remember, Dell Computers was kind of at its heyday for mass customization of computer products and solutions. And so we took a similar model and applied that to golf. And it was a terrific business. We grew that to about 35 million in revenue. It was venture backed by Sequoia Capital, so one of the heavyweights in Silicon Valley. And we did great up until 2000, 2001. Significant, obviously, recession and a big reset in the .com space. And so after that, I went to work in tech strategy consulting, and then at SAP. So, of course, the well-known German software company.
That's your connection to Germany.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my original connection to Germany. So I've been to Waldorf many times. Nice. I've experienced white asparagus season. So the finest that the countryside has to offer in that part of the country.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun. But, through that process, I got exposure to many, first consulting and then SAP, many large companies to, I think, complement my startup experience at ChipShot. And I saw many different industries. And it was through that Amr, who is founder, and my brother, who I referenced earlier, he was working at Microsoft running an ad sales team. And together we decided to start PubMatic. And the idea really behind PubMatic, well, let me start with the mission statement. So PubMatic's mission is that we fuel the endless potential of internet content creators. So we all love, I think, the content, journalism, entertainment, games, news, of course, that the internet brings us 24/7. And more than enjoy, I think it's critical to a vibrant and open and educated democracy, right? To have this plethora of inputs and voices. And to do that requires, of course, significant advertising revenue. That's the primary business model of content on the internet today. And so publishers, of course, want to invest as much as possible in that content and journalism. But to do that, they need a healthy advertising business. And so that's where PubMatic comes in, is that we were founded really to help publishers generate as much and as strong of a revenue potential as possible from internet advertising. And I'm proud to say that over our lifetime, we've delivered several $1 billion with a B as in boy back to publishers since our existence. So I think we've made a real impact in terms of that mission, which of course allows the content creators to invest in journalism and content delivery.
When was that? When was PubMatic founded?
So we were founded in 2006. So we will turn 13 later this year. And it's been a tremendous journey, I would say. First, we were the first sell-side platform in the industry, first to do real-time bidding transactions back in 2009, and then header bidding, of course, and then transition from desktop to mobile. And now we have quality, fraud, supply path optimization, and identity as kind of the new topics and new trends. So I think there's a lot, that's happening. And I think what's interesting about this industry is that every 2 to 3 years, it almost reinvents itself or transitions from one major technology platform to the next. And so it means you've got to be, I think, nimble and agile and really stay on your toes from an innovation perspective.
Your founding and starting story reminds me a little bit of my own, because what you probably don't know is that you see me as a conference organizer right now. There is a story before that. So in 2010, I also got into this industry because I came from online publishing as well. As I heard your brother also did, or he was at least working for publishing businesses and selling their ads. Yeah. So I personally also came from online publishing and started also one of the first SSP companies in Germany in 2010. It was called Revenue Max back then.
I remember that.
You really remember that? Yeah. Unfortunately, it failed a couple of years later. Yeah. But I also remember, as you said, you started in 2006 already. Back then, there was no words like programmatic. Also, you didn't know.
Real-time bidding didn't exist then.
Right. And also, you probably didn't use the name or the keyword SSP for it, because that didn't exist back then.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess the name PubMatic also comes from, so what I experienced and what my reason for founding this business was, that there was so many options for publishers back then to sell their inventory to. So many different ways, like platforms that you can offer your inventory to, and sales houses and sales companies. And is the name PubMatic coming from the idea that you automate this process and structure it better than it was before? Yeah,
that's right. So the name comes from publisher and automatic, right? As you surmised, combined into one. Yeah. And I think really, prior to our founding, there's a lot of ad networks on the landscape. Yeah. And so publishers would manually work with multiple ad networks to try to optimize and maximize their revenue. Yeah. But that obviously was a very cumbersome and difficult proposition. And Amr and I both felt that there was a lot of technology that could be built to help publishers and, of course, to automate this process and increase their revenue. And both of us have backgrounds in computer science. Yeah. And so a lot of the data was there, but systems weren't built that way. Yeah. And I would say as well, there were a lot of choices for advertisers at that time to optimize how they reach audiences, how they reach consumers. But the sell side was, in comparison, significantly less innovated or penetrated from a solution perspective. And so that's why we started PubMatic back when we did.
Yeah, very interesting story. So I also have some personal experience with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Not as successful as you, but at least I tried.
Yeah, well, you got to try. So I applaud you for that. That's exactly right.
What publishers did you start with? So which were the first that you got on board with this new business model?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we launched initially a self-service product. And we launched at the TechCrunch 40 conference. So going, back to the very first TechCrunch event. And we launched at that event and we opened it up for online signups. And within 24 hours, we found 1,000 publishers had signed up. And everybody from large publishers like America Online back then to, small publishers, of course, that you had never heard of before. And so what we discovered, I think, through that process is that there was a real need and pain point around what it was that we're solving. And of course, the product you ship as a version 1 looks very different from version 5 or version 10, or, in our case, 13 years later, and we release software every 2 weeks. So we're maybe on, version somewhere in the thousands, tens of thousands. So the product evolves and the the capabilities evolve, but the root cause or the root pain points that we're solving for, I think, remain today, which is how do publishers get a better understanding of their audience? How do they make more sense of the advertising landscape? And how do they build a better and more sustainable ad business in order to invest back into content and journalism and entertainment?
Yeah, the focus of the publisher still is to maximize their revenues, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think the landscape, of course, has gotten incredibly more complex, where now you have mobile devices, an iPad device, for instance. You have streaming, connected TV, OTT types of devices. You have a variety of different ad formats, video, display, native ad formats. Yeah. We've got more coming with, virtual reality and augmented reality. So and then on top of that, I think data has become obviously much more valuable and much more critical to the entire equation. And I think publishers are challenged to recruit, retain, invest in the people and the systems and processes that are needed to maximize the opportunity here. And so that's really where we come in as a technology and services partner to these publishers to help them solve this problem, this challenge. And today we work with several thousand publishers globally. We're really focused on, I would say, the head of the market. So for instance, in Germany, we work with 7 of the top 10 AGOF publishers. So publishers like United Internet Media, Berta, eBay Deutschland, Gutefrag. So really focused on, the high quality brand name publishers. And, the team has come a long way here in Germany as well. So we have now almost 10 people on the ground in Hamburg, in Munich, in Berlin. You have to be in many cities to be effective here in Germany. And then most recently we hired Eki Schlotbaum coming from Group M. And I'm almost positive I mispronounced some parts of his name.
That's close enough.
Thank you. So he's just started in the last week and he's got a terrific background on both the publisher side and then most recently at Group M on the agency side to lead our presence here in Central Europe going forward.
When did you actually start the German market? When did you come to this?
We came to the German market in 2012. And I recall that, very early on, I think German publishers were keen to do something in programmatic, but at the same time were also keen to protect the revenue streams that they had built on a, premium direct sold basis. And so it's been, I would say, very much an evolution in the market to move the market towards more and more programmatic capabilities while helping publishers, preserve the significant revenue streams that they have from direct sold advertising.
Yeah. I remember we also started D3Con in 2011. And back then it was a thing that every publisher wanted to look at.
Yes.
But they were pretty scared of what they were also interested in the potential, but they were also scared of all the politics and the changes in the ecosystem that
could come. Yes, exactly.
Are you, when we're talking about ecosystem, I mean, you describe PubMatic as a very publisher-focused business. When you have now hired Eki Schlotbaum from the Group M, that sounds to me a bit like you were also thinking about the advertiser and the demand side in the future. So is that a change in your strategy, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think that has been an evolution for us. And so you're 100% right. So we think about ourselves as a publisher-centric business. And you see that, of course, in our mission statement. But key to publishers deriving significant revenue from advertising is really to drive ROI for advertisers. So advertisers, of course, they bring the budgets, marketers bring the budgets into digital advertising, into programmatic, and they have choices in terms of where do they spend that budget? Do they spend it on digital? Do they spend it on TV, on radio, on print? Do they spend it in connected TV or OTT types of environments? So, of course, advertisers have choices. And so one of the things that we've been evolving is helping advertisers and agencies really measure and determine what is the ROI that they're delivering and how can we help them improve that across our platform and across our publisher base so that they are incented to put more money to work in programmatic advertising, which ultimately builds more revenue for publishers and I think builds a more sustainable digital advertising ecosystem. I think over the last 5-7 years, a lot of the innovation that's happened has been around what I'll call short-term delivery of ad revenue to publishers. And, that I think has a role to play. And we've certainly played our own role in that. We've shifted much more to how do we bring long-term benefits to advertisers in terms of ROI, which in turn lead to long-term benefits to the publisher in terms of the sustainability of revenue.
Do you have a few examples of that?
So I think there's a lot of examples around things related to supply chain integrity, transparency, and getting more comfort, delivering more comfort to advertisers around the money that they put into programmatic. So for instance, we shifted our auction platform to first price auction dynamics about 1.5 years ago. And so
before Google.
Before Google, yes. Well, before Google, I think. Google has announced it, but hasn't quite yet done it, right? And that obviously has helped advertisers get more comfort that, okay, what I bid is what I pay. And so there can be less games being played in the auction dynamics. We removed buy-side fees on our platform about 1 year ago. We were the first SSP to introduce a fraud-free guarantee to buyers, which is very simple. And it states that if there's fraud that you measure on our platform via any third-party solution like Integral Ad Science or Double Verify, then you don't pay for that fraud. And we also don't pay the publisher for that spend so that we create the incentives for a healthy ecosystem. Most recently, we released a white paper around log files. So how on the sell side, we can share transaction logs with buyers so buyers can verify that the auction dynamics are accurate, that if they put $1 into a DSP or €1 into a DSP and bid, what goes to the publisher, what goes to the DSP, what goes to the SSP. So all of these things are really around transparency and confidence building so that advertisers and agencies can verify what they're being told and bid and spend with more confidence and really simplify the programmatic and digital ecosystem as compared to maybe the traditional ad formats that have been simpler for them to buy, like TV and radio.
When you just brought up the topic of fraud, I would be interested in some more about that. I mean, you said now that you are only or mostly working with the real big brand publishers. Is that also a reason why you had the experience with smaller independent publishers? It's more difficult to check for quality and to avoid fraud. Do you have any experience in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very aggressive in terms of managing to extremely high quality standards on our platform. And we use third-party tools to measure all the time. I mentioned a couple of them earlier. Wide ops we use in the video space as well, for instance. And we target below 1% fraud across our platform. And to us, that's a sign that we're doing a good job if we're able to deliver that. And we measure ourselves, and we actually share that measurement back to the buyers every month. So we give them a report of what is the level of fraud that we've seen on our platform. We have the fraud-free guarantee, as I mentioned. And we're active participants in things like ads.txt. Mobile app ads.txt is just rolling out now. And so we have been the first to announce our adoption of that, which is happening this month. We also are tag certified, trustworthy accountability group, JICWebs in the UK. Here in Germany, there's the BVDW Code of Conduct. So we work in all of these bodies really in order to ensure that we have the highest quality of inventory. And one, I think, example of that, we were talking about your earlier American podcast interview, which was with BuzzFeed.
Right.
And they've done a great series, I think, around ad fraud and uncovering a number of different schemes over the last few months. And in aggregate, every time one of those stories comes out, we do a deep dive on the publishers and the apps that we're working with. And in aggregate, we've refunded very small amounts of money as a result of those investigations, which tells me that we're being very good in terms of being proactive and eliminating fraud up front before the buyers on our platform get exposed to it.
Okay, sounds good. Do you see any other, when you compare your different international markets, you have most of your experience in the US, but you also have some in Germany now for 7 years.
Yeah, that's right.
what are the main differences that you see in these two markets? What has been more difficult in Germany, or maybe also something that works better in Germany? It's easier.
Yeah. So I think in every market, as you're pointing out, is different, and we operate. We have 13 offices around the world. And we do business in probably about 25 to 30 different countries. So we have, I think, a pretty strong global view. Our non-US revenue is about 30% of our revenue. So, pretty healthy global perspective. And I think what are some of the unique things here in Germany? Number one is that there's a small set of publishers that really manage the lion's share of, let's say, head or quality supply in the ecosystem, right? So, I referenced the AGOF list earlier, but within that, you have, a number of different companies that own hundreds, if not thousands of different, properties, websites, and apps. And so it's a relatively, I would say, closed environment in that regard, where, a handful of agencies and a handful of publishers can influence significant control over the market. So on the one hand, I think that can be a gate on the pace of innovation, because you don't have, let's say, outsiders that are coming in and can disrupt significantly. On the other hand, we see with initiatives like the NetID Foundation that it can also create terrific seeds for collaboration. And so we're excited to have joined the NetID Foundation recently and be participating with that. And I see this ID initiative playing out not only in Germany, but other similar approaches in different markets around the world, where using ID, we can create a very relevant advertising proposition to the consumer that's privacy safe, but also something that's very compelling for advertisers that gets them to spend more on the open internet because the identity problem can be solved for. And I see NetID really as a leader in terms of where it is in the ecosystem in Germany as compared to other initiatives in other parts of the world.
When we're talking about market dominance, you mentioned the large agencies and some large publishers here in Germany that make the market relatively easy to dominate for a couple of players. But there's another player, a very big player in the market that's called Google. Did you, when you started PubMatic, expect them to become such dominant player in this market, also in publisher monetization? Yeah,
I think, that's been fairly well understood from early on. I think Google bought DoubleClick, I want to say in 2009, somewhere thereabouts. And so that obviously deepened their position in display. But I think Google has always been obviously one of the largest, if not the largest, share of digital advertising dollars. And what I see is that Google, they just had earnings, right? And so they notched slower revenue growth. I think they are ceding some share to other companies in the market. And I also see that both publishers and marketers are not so fearful of strategies that go with technology that comes from outside Google. And that didn't used to be the case several years ago. So for instance, while I was here at Online Marketing Rockstars conference, I talked with a number of publishers about ad serving software and infrastructure, and using PubMatic's ad serving solution, for instance, which I think a couple of years ago was very much not the case, that publishers would be open to alternatives to Google's DoubleClick solution. So I think the market is looking very much for more open solutions, more transparent solutions, more innovative solutions. And I think that's a major opportunity for independent technology providers like PubMatic.
Google has gotten so big that I see many people deciding to buy technology that's not Google just because of that, because they don't want to feed that monopoly.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's unhealthy in any market, digital advertising or otherwise, to have one company that can be too dominant. And so people ultimately want to have, I think, a variety of solutions and really want to compete on the basis of innovation and choice. And header bidding, for example, I think has become as rampant and mature as it is for precisely this reason, which is that people wanted to be outside of the Google box in terms of how auction dynamics and decisions are made. And we see that it's had a major impact where publishers have increased revenue. And on the marketer side, they have more choice in terms of how they spend their money.
Still, there's been quite a lot of competition also among the independent SSPs. I mean, there have been a couple in Europe, and then there's been a couple more in the US. And I think they haven't all grown as much as they thought. And there has been AppNexus and all. There still are a lot of players outside of Google, and they are facing some fierce competition among one another. What do you think made PubMatic successful among those?
Yeah, I think you characterized it correctly, and I think we're at a new point in the market that's really focused on consolidation. So in the last couple of years, significant barriers to entry have come into place. So things like ads.txt, things like GDPR. Right. So regulations, rules, the codes of conduct that we have in place with many agencies and DSPs. And if you kind of reflect back, it's hard to name a new DSP or a new SSP that has come onto the scene in the last couple of years. So I think it's really the incumbent providers. Some of them are getting bigger and stronger, like PubMatic. Some of them are not. I think we're one of the few SSPs that's growing. This year, we plan to grow our headcount by about 100 people, which is about 25% growth. Last year was our 6th consecutive year of profitability, and we anticipate more of that this year. So we're investing, with cash generated by our business, which I think is a relatively unique position amongst independent ad tech providers. And, to your question about why do I think that's the case? I think one of the things I pride ourselves on at PubMatic is to be strong operators and to understand the reality as it may be changing and to react accordingly. So when we have things like ads.txt come through or other industry changes, we're about to see some changes from Google, for instance, around the Chrome browser. I think it's a mindset that we have around rather than running away from those challenges, how do we run towards them and create opportunity from them? And by doing that, I think we've been able to stay very agile, very flexible, and drive many years of consecutive profitability and growth. And I believe we're taking market share as a result of that.
When you're speaking about changing markets, you probably also thought about mobile, because that's something that has changed the market a lot, and probably this is one of the things or the parts of the market that's growing the most. Is that something that you're focused on? Yeah,
absolutely. So mobile inventory is now about 2/3 of the traffic on our platform, and we're processing roughly 70 to 80 billion ad impressions on a daily basis. So very significant scale. We don't try to process every single ad impression. Actually, we spend a lot of time curating the impressions we do get from publishers. We want to be focused on the publishers or the impressions that will add value from a marketer or buyer perspective. But mobile app and mobile web have both been significantly and fast growing segments of our business. And in fact, we released a report recently in conjunction with Forrester, where we analyzed and researched what are some of the challenges around growing mobile even faster. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, of course, mobile consumption on the internet has moved largely towards mobile, but advertising dollars are still a little bit catching up. And so some of the things that we saw through that study are that viewability, fraud, and measurement or attribution are at the forefront of marketer challenges around how can they spend more money where that consumption is happening in a mobile app environment. And so we're very excited. Earlier this year, we launched into beta a product called OpenBid, which is an SDK solution for mobile app publishers. And it brings into the current ad tag, ad network waterfall in the mobile space, it brings programmatic ad budgets in on a parallel auction basis. So publishers can derive a better user experience because ads load faster for the consumer. And then it brings significantly better monetization. But they don't have to throw away their ad network waterfall that they've taken years to build. They can add this in alongside. and selectively drive more monetization. So we're in beta with that right now. We're seeing terrific results. We announced a partnership with Gameloft earlier this year, which is around how we can use data, how we can use our fraud solutions, our measurement viewability solutions to drive more programmatic revenue for, a major gaming app developer in Gameloft. As gaming, I think, has become more and more mainstream as an environment for marketers to go after.
Yeah. So you also see that as an important growth market for your business.
Absolutely. So it's growing at an extremely rapid rate for us, and one which we think is key to our future alongside, I would say, video advertising. So when we look at the market generally, about 2/3 of every incremental programmatic ad dollar over the next 5 years will be in-app video. And so video is also a core area of investment for us and growth for us. And we see the not only desktop video, but in-app video as also being a tremendous opportunity going forward. It's a very rich storytelling or brand building environment from a marketer perspective. It's also very rich from a consumer experience perspective. And then, of course, it has, high CPMs, which publishers like. So we think it, really meets the needs of all three major constituents in online advertising. And so we're spending a lot of time and growing in that area very, very rapidly.
Okay. Makes sense. All the best for you with that.
Thank you.
Something else that I noted earlier when you were talking about the billions of dollars that you deliver over the years to the publishers and your partners, it sounded a little like you are also, like, from a political perspective and a freedom of speech perspective or so, interested in saving the publishers, so to say. Is that something that you think about? Is it more than just a business to help publishers keep their businesses running and keep a broad variety of publishers alive that maybe shape public opinion and whatever people talk about what they do?
Yeah, I think very much so. I think, we all have choices in terms of how we spend our time as individuals from a work environment perspective. And there's many great opportunities that anybody can pursue. But I think what separates great companies from others is having a mission orientation and an ability to not only build a good business, but to do something that's beneficial for everybody in society. And I think we're operating in a time where having a freedom of perspective, of voice, of different content, and being able to create your own educated view as a result of all of that diverse content is, critically important. And so we're very proud, not only myself, but I think all of our employees, to be able to contribute back to society in that sense, and to have contributed, several $billion back, I think is a very meaningful contribution. And that's, I think, a key part of what drives us on a day in and day out basis.
Where do you think you and the company are going to be in 5 or 10 years? So what's next for the business and for yourself, maybe? I think this industry is very hard to predict,
3 years, let alone 5 to 10 years. I think one of the things that we very much focused on is building a healthy business that has the mission orientation we talked about earlier, but also is financially independent and stable. There was a major, obviously, bankruptcy in the industry earlier this year. And I think customers are looking for fewer, bigger partners that are stable and that will be around for the long term. And so we've run our business, I think, capitally very efficiently, so that we can control our own destiny. We don't have any debt. We generate positive cash flow. We have a healthy cash balance in our bank accounts. And so that allows us to invest opportunistically behind the right customers, behind the right partners, behind the right technologies, but also, weather any storms that might be on the horizon. And it's always hard to predict when those come. So, where are we in 5 to 10 years? I think we're probably working on many of the same core underlying problems and challenges. Probably the technologies, the ad formats, a lot of that will have changed. Probably many of the large publishers and large marketers will not have changed. So I think we'll be working with many of the same or similar customers on a global basis. We may still be a private company. We may be part of a larger organization. We may be a public company. I think all of those options are available to us.
Yeah, it's always hard to predict
exactly.
in such a market. Yeah,
exactly.
As you mentioned, the bankruptcy of Seismic, do you want to share any theory of what went wrong there and what happened?
Yeah, I don't have good insight into, I think, what may have gone wrong or what may have happened there. I do think, they had private equity investors behind them with significant amount of debt, as I understand it. And whenever you have a capital structure like that, then you have significant constituencies in these debt holders that you have to look after, and they of course have their own requirements as it relates back to their the institutions that are behind them, and so we've taken great care to focus on an equity as opposed to debt capital structure, and then trying to be and in fact being debt free and having a healthy cash balance so that we can be flexible and control our own destiny.
Okay, yeah, that sounds reasonable. So from what I heard is also the one of the reasons that they failed in the end is that they took over a struggling rocket fuel and integrated that, and that made the whole situation even more complicated. But yeah, we both don't have
exactly. Perfect insight into that. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think, one other, topic we didn't touch on so far is supply path optimization. Yeah, which I think is a fairly hot kind of topic or trend in the industry right now. And so maybe we can take a minute or two to talk about that.
Sure. Explain your view on that.
Yeah. So I think with header bidding, what's happened over the last couple of years is inventory has proliferated in that publishers work with multiple SSPs or header bidding partners. And so the same inventory can be flowing across multiple different platforms. And so from a buyer perspective, buyers are trying to decide where should they access that inventory and how do they do that kind of most responsibly from a client perspective. And so going back to some of the topics we talked about earlier, where marketers have choices in terms of where they spend their money, we have focused on how to deliver ROI back to the advertiser, back to the marketer, so that they want to invest more in digital and in programmatic. And we announced a deal with the Goodway Group, which is largely US focused agency. They're actually just now expanding into Europe. And with that relationship, we are helping them make a more transparent supply chain, a supply chain that is lower cost for them to access, that's free of fraud, that gives them confidence that what they spend is ultimately what goes to publishers, and that allows them to go back to their clients and say, look, we've worked hard to make the digital programmatic supply chain more transparent and cleaner. And so they have more confidence to put their client budgets there. And I think that's a trend we're going to see across a variety of different marketers as well as agencies over the next couple of years. And so we see that as a terrific opportunity to deliver not only value to the advertiser, but to bring increased revenue back to the publisher and continue to grow a profitable business.
So that's one of the main pain points of the industry that people have been talking about for years, that there is a hugely crowded Lumascape map where all kinds of players are in between me and my money as an advertiser and the publisher. And there's so many also often intransparent and complicated players in between. So what you describe as supply path optimization could maybe also be called supply chain shortening.
Yes, I think consolidation, very much.
Consolidation.
Right. And as we talked earlier, there aren't new DSPs and SSPs coming into the market. And I think the legal compliance regulatory hurdles are also getting higher with GDPR, with ads.txt. There's legislation now pending in the US and California in particular that borrows from some of the concepts of GDPR. So I think all of these kinds of trends lead to a maturation in the industry, a consolidation where there are fewer but stronger partners, technology partners that publishers and marketers can rely on. And we very much endeavor to be one of the strongest partners, if not the strongest, that both agencies and publishers can rely on in the future.
Makes sense. All the best for that business. And thank you for having been here.
Yes.
crossing my fingers for your successful next 10 years, as you said, although you don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know, but yeah, I appreciate that.
We hope it's going to be good.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Thomas, for the time. It was great to spend time with you today.
Yeah, I hope to see you again, maybe sometime on the D3Con stage next year.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Have a good day and have a good trip home.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.